Suzanne is the co-founder and co-artistic director of 1927. I'm sure many of you already know 1927's trademark style, which brings bold and wondrous stories to life through their unique fusion of animation, music, and performance on stage. Alongside co-artistic director Paul Barritt for 1927, Suzanne has written and directed the multi-award winning shows Between the Devil and the Deep Blue Sea, The Animals and the Children Took to the Streets, Golem, and most recently Roots. Since 2007, the company have toured extensively, both nationally and internationally, and their productions have won a real host of awards, including the Herald Angel, the Fringe First, the Critics' Circle, the Peter Brook Empty Space Ensemble Award, and that's only to name but a few. Suzanne's opera debut was the Magic Flute for the Comiche Opera in Berlin, which she co-conceived and co-directed. This production has been running in rep since 2012 in Berlin, Dusseldorf and Duisburg, but its recent Australian tour saw it win the 2019 Helpman Award for Best Direction of an Opera. And Suzanne recently featured alongside Paul Barritt in the Stage 100 list of the most influential people in British theatre. Suzanne has called her presentation today Anim-acting, which is a term she might explain in a bit more detail, but it's a term she has very much created, which is about the type of acting required to meld with animation. So without further delay from me, please join me in welcoming Suzanne Andrade to the stage.
Hi everyone. I'm aware it's the end of the day, so I shall try and keep things lively. I'm Suzanne. It's an honour to be here. I've enjoyed listening to everybody speak so much. I've come up with loads of good ideas, and I'm gonna steal lots from what you've all been saying. So thank you. As Matt just said, our trademark style, for want of a better word, integrates performance, music, and animation. I have been solely focusing on 1927 since 2007 and a bit before that as well. I don't have any other job, so I've been living in this sort of mixed reality and thinking in terms of the merging of animation and flesh and music for really quite a long time now. A dream in cartoons. And at some point I will go and do something else. So today I'm going to discuss theatre design, but from a director's perspective. So it's going to be slightly different and hopefully useful. I don't even really like to think of myself as a director in some ways, because we're such an ensemble and what we do is such a collaboration. So I am a director who's fortunate enough to work utterly in collaboration with 1927's designer and animator Paul Barritt. And we work completely hand in hand from the initial concept of every show we make right through to opening night. We're by each other's sides, and actually we normally do these talks as a bit of a shit double act. But his wife is about to have a baby literally any minute now, so he's not here. So I'm just going to play a little trailer. It's a kind of mega mix of 1927, just to give you an idea of what we do for those who haven't seen it. There's a little bit of trumpet blowing that happens over the top of it, like words come up that say 1927 are amazing, because it's for promoters, so I apologise about those slightly eggy moments. Right, okay. One or more updates are available. Remind me later. That's what we do. On repeat, ad infinitum, mix animation and performance and music to make shows. So how, as a director, do I achieve our work, and what does our rehearsal process look like? So this is going to be a little bit of a lo-fi, meat and two veg. This is what 1927's rehearsal process looks like. Initially, Paul, the animator, and I, and an actress who's also a director and a costume maker, and Esme, sit together and discuss loads of ideas. We tend to rant about the state of the world and discuss loads of ideas. Story, design, the size of our screen, the themes are all discussed without any particular order at all, and just a complete blurring of boundaries. We don't really have a kind of design meeting or a script meeting. It's all just piling in, really. I tend to bring some ideas and sketches of scenes, maybe a character monologue, maybe an idea for a scene, and then everybody brings visual ideas and visual references that then come back into my writing. I then bring that back to them, more scenes, more discussions, more ranting. Paul then starts to draw up some aesthetic ideas, and we discuss the overriding kind of colours, themes. Quite often when a theme emerges, this theme then seeps into absolutely everything, every single aspect of the show. And then the way I know how to move forward as a writer-director is based on these conversations. So I might realise I only need 2 lines of text, or we just need 1 subtitle, because the colour scheme, the costumes, the makeup is going to do quite a lot of the work. So that's the way we all work. Everybody's ego has to be left at the door. So you can't come in and say, but I've written this beautiful dialogue. It's got to be in there. Because if it doesn't work for everything else, then it has to go. It goes on the cutting room floor. So you bring things, and if it's not needed, off it goes. And this is the same with the animation, which is quite painstaking at times, because as anyone who's ever animated knows, there aren't really any shortcuts, especially when it's all handcrafted and all hand-drawn. So alongside this, I work with a musician. I bring some text. She improvises. She is mainly fueled from cake, and I don't really get anything good out of her unless I bring cake along with script. And it's a really organic process. It happens in her mum's house at the piano, and she's just riffing around bits of text I'm bringing. All the while the stories and the characters are emerging. We're still not in a room where we're testing anything out. Still don't have a full script. Script often comes after we've opened. So we're devising the whole time. We're kind of doing this. So then we start testing, and we might hire a space, or we do a lot of work in our working man's club. So we might have the barman sort of watching us with a wry smile on his face as we're testing our animations. I'm just going to talk you through the testing stage and show you a few things. The tech we use at the moment is Photoshop, After Effects, drag and stop frame, and then we work using QLab, Catalyst, and a Mac Pro, and 1 projector. So we front project all of our work. We rarely use stage lights at all. I mean, I don't even know what stage lights do apart from spotlight. I tend to sort of say, you can have a spotlight there, because we do everything from the projector, so it's our main light source. And it's a really flexible light source in some ways. So in rehearsal, we have, it's just a room that has a bit of blackout, a projector, some instruments, props, lots of cardboard, lots of cloth. However big the show is that we might be working on, it always begins with cardboard, bits of cloths, and normally from Argos you can get these changing screens that cost about 15 quid, and we normally have a big bag of those because they're amazing for making screens. So whatever the production budget is, one of the rules in the theatre is we just need to be left alone in a room with our Argos poles and some cardboard, because that's how we work it out. And they're going, but we can knock something up. I mean, we can do it out of MDF. And it's like, well, actually, we just need the cardboard to begin with, just to kind of help. So let me show you this little film. This is the kind of thing that Paul would bring in to our testing sessions. So we might have 7 or 8 little animations we want to test, and what we're asking ourselves is, does this interaction work between an actor and the animation? So what I've got here is a little bird. The bird flies around a few times and then lands. So what we would be testing here is the interaction of a performer. The timing of that. Off you go. I was just about to say how reliable cartoons are, but apparently not. Right, but I'm going to be a bit quicker this time. So what we're trying here is, does it work to have a bird land on the hand? So we might look at that and go, yeah, okay, in theory that's going to work. I wouldn't normally be in this position. You can go now. Thanks. So what we would do is we have a bit more flexibility where we're in the rehearsal room of where the animation lands. The bird idea came from, we made, our last show was based on all these folk tales. So we had this story called The Magic Bird's Heart. And it began with a couple in a living, we wanted to kind of, it's an old folk tale, but we wanted to set it in a kind of tenement block in the 1970s. So we had like the old school test card on the television and this kind of orange and brown wallpaper. And we wanted to take this quite violent folktale into quite a domestic setting. So we were banging around loads of ideas, and then we thought, okay, so we're going to have an animated bird. We need to make an entrance for the bird. So the bird will appear at the window, fly around a few times so the audience see this is going to be a key character, and then the bird will land on an actor's hand. So that's the kind of little interaction that we play with. What we also wanted was that the main couple, was sat on a sofa. So we also wanted to do a test to see whether an animated sofa would work. This is how it begins, really, Churchill, bits of cloth. So what we had was we fashioned the kind of cloth screen into the shape of a sofa, and then we projected a sofa onto it. So the actor is essentially trapped in about this much space with a screen in front of them and lots of props and a chair, and knowing they're going to be interacting with this bird. So the testing stage sort of looks like this, and we start going, oh, is that going to work? We like restrictions in 1927. We like rules, we like boundaries. It's a bit sort of masochistic in a way, what we do. But we quite like this discipline because it then throws up loads of ideas. So this gives us our acting style. So the stage design's totally integrated into the ideas. We like the idea that you'll just see this old couple from behind. So we had 2 young lithe actresses playing, an ancient man and an ancient woman. So it was quite nice to just see them from behind and then think about how that affects their movements and how they're introduced to an audience. But just using that as your kind of rules, as your boundaries. So here is, I think this was in Tunisia, our actors have to place little spikes all over the floor so that they know where they're going, where they're standing, are they in their light, where do they have to stand to interact with the bird. So there's tiny, tiny little marks all over the floor that the actors need to stand on, hundreds of them, and they're tiny. And if they're in the wrong position, it doesn't work. So if I was doing the bird interaction and I'm stood too far that way, the bird's not going to land on my hand. If I'm too close to it, the bird's going to be all over me, which is horrible. So the actors get used to standing on tiny, tiny little marks. I said it was a bit masochistic. And then we bring on screens, like the sofa screen is just a plain white cloth, but we bring it in, it's on legs, and then everything has little marks all over the stage. So it's really lo-fi and has continued to be, really. So for this scene, we had a slapstick fight behind the sofa. So at this point, when we're still kind of testing it and we're in the church hall and it's just Paul and Ez and I doing everything, the whole process gets really, really messy really quickly, and that's what we love about it. It's a bit like children playing a game. So we'd have this kind of setup, and then we start mucking about with slapstick ideas. So, okay, I could punch you over the head here, and we could have some kind of exclamation marks above you, things like that. What happens in this particular story is the old man kills the bird, eats the heart, and then has magic powers. So, and then his wife gets jealous, makes him vomit up the heart, and then she eats it and she has magic powers. I didn't write this, it's an old folk tale. So at this point, the three of us, like kids, are just mucking about, like getting in behind the sofa and going, let me have a go, let me have a go, ah, yeah, yeah, and then a heart can come up. And it's like that constantly, and we're just playing, and then we'll sit down and come up with more ideas, and then... But at this stage, it's not the painstaking idea, it's just the fun. Come up with loads of daft ideas. Imagine your actors are cartoons, what can we achieve? When we feel confident that the ideas are going to work and there's going to be some flow, then Paul will go and make up the animations a bit more. So they start off really rough, the tests, otherwise he just wastes hours and hours, and it might be for a scene or a gag that actually doesn't really work. So from an actor's perspective, and this is where we come to anim-acting, which is something, it's a bit of an in-joke really in the group. Someone will just say, nice anim-action, yeah. There is a certain type of acting required to be in a 1927 show to make it work. Most actors just really go with it and love it, and some hate it because it's really, really restrictive. So just to go back to the bird for a second. If I'm turned in, if I hold the bird and I'm turned in too much this way, I go into your world, the world of the spectator. So the actor, thank you very much, the actor has to stand in certain ways and certain positions that make the whole image work. So you find when actors first start acting in 1927 show that they're just sort of a bit like this, because they're like, hang on, how flat am I meant to be? Or they're totally turned in, and we end up with like legs here and everything, trying to make it work. And it really just takes a bit of time for the actor to understand who they are in the overall picture and how their body needs to shift and change. We use eyes and heads a lot, are so important. I mean, they're important in everything you do on stage, obviously. Nothing new there, but to draw attention to the animation, because the animation is such a character as well. So yeah, we end up with lots of kind of crab-like, puppet-like acting, and we're constantly trying to play around with that space between what the animation can bring and our paper puppets, and then what the actor can bring, and find something that's kind of in between. And this has led a lot of people to say that sometimes watching a 1927 show is a bit like having a weird dream, and we have a lot of people have nightmares actually having watched our shows, which I think is only a good thing. But I think it's something to do with the animation and the acting meeting does form kind of odd pictures in your mind sometimes. So our actors sometimes watch it a few times. By the time we've got into rehearsal with them, generally, we've worked out all of the choreography because it's all there from the beginning. The animation, the choreography, the stories, the characters are all developing together. So quite often by the time we get into a space with performers, we've worked out most of it. And then we teach it. So they might stand on the outside and watch it a few times and understand it and then jump in and have a go. And they're constantly modifying their bodies to fit with the animation. It's really hard for actors to do it because they go, but I've got this great idea, you know, I want to jump around and do a flip and then catch the bird. And so we try to be open to everything and say, let's try that. But quite often we find that it's just something really simple that's required. And for some actors, that's quite difficult. For them to really fully understand they're part of this bigger picture, and every single aspect is really, really important. It's not just about them. Some opera singers find that a bit difficult. Size of gesture needs to be taken into account. We take a lot of inspiration from silent film, from early melodrama, from music hall. naturalism very rarely works with our style of animation and performance. It kind of needs to begin with the truth. You find the truth. So if you're, we had a scene in a show where we were sweeping animated dust, and the idea was that it looked really casual. So the actor has a real broom and they sweep and then animated dust appears. But if you do that in a really kind of mechanical, puppety way, it's not magic anymore, it's not a trick. So you've got to find the truth of it. How would I actually sweep the floor? Now, how do I just slightly adjust my body? Now, how do I do that? And you just have to repeat it and repeat it and repeat it until it just looks really casual, until the audience just believe they're watching a world where somebody can just use a real broom, sweep, and there's animated dust. And we never draw attention to it. Something actors struggle with when we first start working together. They want to draw attention to everything in a kind of dust. And actually, it's like, no. In this world, that just happens. And it's like, bird, there's a bird. And actually, it's about kind of, it's all got to be a bit casual, a little bit cool, a little bit kind of subverted. It's at the same time, it's pantomime, it's musical, it's melodrama. So their acting does go through a very, very technical stage of stand on these little lines and the bird is going to appear on the 8th beat of the piano note. And it's, okay. And so you get the technical side of it all, and then you start adding truth and gesture and play and making it really, really casual. We've got to be really careful about the gestures becoming empty, because they can very, very quickly become empty and it can look very mechanical. Some of our operas are now on there. I don't know how many assistant directors they're on or how many casts they're on, but I don't even think I could go and see some of them now, because I just think the Chinese whispers that would have happened with the performance style, and they've maybe had one rehearsal, and I can just imagine going along and people just doing the arm movements, almost ignoring the fact they're in this animated world. And it has, I mean, I need a massive gin and tonic before I go and see some of our shows. And then it's okay. And some scenes I just close my eyes, because I think I spent months choreographing that, so that it was just so neat and magical and it just happened and you're just moving. And I can see you looking for your spike and then doing the action that the AD's written down in the book. So, c'est la vie. So we don't play with much depth, in any sense of the word, really, in our shows. That's not true. That's doing us a disservice. But our work is really shallow. So we use only sometimes about this much space of a stage. So whereas lots of other productions, you know, come forward, we very rarely come forward. We're kind of stuck to the screen a lot. But again, without making it look like you're stuck to a screen, again, sometimes you get performers standing like this against the wall. And you're not meant to look like you've been caught in one of those security lights. Again, it's casual. You just happen to be against the screen. Sometimes this causes our actors to slightly mistrust us, because what they're experiencing might be this. They've got their head through a hole and I'm asking them to sing and act, and I've shown them the scene and talked them through it, and they're going, and then they're behind a screen like this. Eventually it will look like that, but their experience is that. And so especially when we were first starting off and people really didn't know what we were doing, and especially with the Magic Flute, when all the opera singers just came in like this. And I'm going, yeah, okay, so I've got this great idea with a bird. And but that's their experience of it. So it's very, very strange and quite alienating for performers. And they have to just trust, and we have to do everything we can to help them trust us. A long rehearsal process helps with that a lot, because you really get to know each other. You can be very playful. The performers see how the animation works. We always take them to the studio. They all have a go at stop framing. We always have sessions where you can watch the animation and just play with it. So when we've got our cat here, one of the performers is just up being the cat, other actors will come along and kind of interact with them, and there's just a little bit of play, really. But they do have to have that trust. Generally, the phase of actors not trusting us does pass, but for Magic Flute, for most of the singers, it didn't really pass. Now it's passed, and it's all, oh, Suzanne, because they all want to perform in the Parisian version or whatever it is. But it was a really, really tricky, our first commission, to get the guys to just kind of go with us on this journey. So this is the Magic Flute. It was our biggest show, and we had a huge wall, and the singers were actually attached to the wall using a kind of harness, seatbelt sort of affair. They were attached on, clicked on, and then spun around about 10 feet high in the air on a tiny little ledge, and then they've got to do their coloratura. So we were not very popular for a little bit. And it was genuinely scary up there. So he's down on the floor there, but there are other doors further up the screen. He was lucky. In fact, he insisted on sitting down because he said he could only sing if he was sat down. But most of them, whatever. But most of them were stood up, and it was genuinely terrifying. So I would act out everything I asked the singers to do. I would act out to show that it was fine, they could trust. And it was terrifying because you're just up high and you're completely upright, completely vertical. So whenever I would do it, initially my legs would just start shaking and my palms would just sweat, but I'd be going, it's fine, it's totally fine. And then they've got to interact with all this animation, and because they're really against it, they can't see much. So you're just kind of, and if you look too much, it looks like you're in the audience going, oh, look at the elephant. So you've really got to cheat all of that and cheat the head and cheat the movements. That was a really interesting experience, and quite amazing. And the show's been really popular. We're always only ever one step away from pantomime, but I think Magic Flute got very close. So this was the Queen of the Night. She sings two immensely difficult arias. She was actually not only strapped onto a door, but she had a cocoon around her that we called the cocoon, and a massive headdress so that her head could appear bigger and would fit with this spider body we came up with. We're constantly thinking of ideas. So this screen is absolutely huge, but we're constantly thinking of ideas because an actor can only be as big as an actor is. You can add prosthetics and things, but an actor is only a certain size. So what we did with this, we wanted to have this huge character, but we had to make her kind of spider body and her skeleton arms quite realistic in size, just slightly upscaled. So then we found that we had her legs would do certain things and her arms would do certain things to bring the whole character to life. And meanwhile, the whole time we knew we'd have 30 minutes rehearsal with this singer before she went on stage, and that's all you're given because she's this world famous opera singer. So we had to make what she had to do very easy. And what she's doing is hard enough anyway, but we had to make it work. So all she had to do was a couple of tiny little head movements on certain animated arm gestures. And the technician is cueing hundreds and hundreds of cues for it. So they're watching and they've got the score. And every time the singer or the animated version of the singer moves her arms, that's being cued. So they're literally sat there just da, 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 da. Da, 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 whilst the singer's just able to, strapped on, just singing. But the whole thing kind of comes to life and somehow works. So we refer to this as anim-acting or anim-action, and it's just taking inspiration from the animation, but also realising what you have to do to make that world work. There's a lot of play, and part of the design is a huge part of the process and a huge part of the style of acting that we've actually come up with as well, which I think in some ways is quite unique, especially because we've been doing it for quite a while. What we had with the Magic Flute was that the orchestra suddenly had to, I was thinking of what Dick was saying about light spill. Another big shock for us was because we don't really work with stage lights, and suddenly we have, I think it's a 70-piece orchestra in the pit, and they all turn their lights on, and we didn't realise this to the dress rehearsal, and there's suddenly this huge light spill just flashing up on the screen, and it was a real horror show because you've worked so hard on it. You know, we've worked for years, we've passed it on to the singers quickly, and then there's this light spill, and we said, well, that can't happen. And the Musicians Union said, oh, yes, it can. So we try everything, and it's always this very gentle conversation with the Musicians Union in every venue in the world about, can we put a little gauze over the top here? Can we dim down the lights? And depending on who you're working with and how invested they are in it depends on what you can achieve. So now and then with certain orchestras, there'll be a little bit of light spill just shining up. Most of the audience don't notice it, but that's a 2 gin and tonic show for me, because, it just pains me, it really does. This was a suicide aria that Pamina did. And one of the things we're able to do with animation and with mixing these two realities that's so great is we had her on a cliff. So she stood, 8 foot, maybe higher, up in the air. And then at a certain point in the music, she moves her foot down and the cliff falls away underneath her. So it's this really, and it really makes people in the audience go, because you just buy into it. It just looks like she stood up on a cliff with the moon behind her. But all it requires from the actor is a very tiny movement for the image to work. Again, because they're opera singers and certain types of opera singers, they want to do more, they want to give more. So they're going, yeah, but I can really fall forward here and I can wave my arms around. And you go, you just don't, it's not required for the image. And it's always a difficult kind of conversation to have, to get everybody to really, really understand what is required for the scene. Ego left at the door, this is what it is, and we're all making this together. If the singer doesn't do that little move, the scene is lost, the image is lost, really. So as much as it might sound to them at the time like I'm asking such a tiny thing, and they've spent years training, and they've just done 10 weeks in leg acting, and all I'm asking them to do is just move the leg a tiny bit, but that's all that's required for the whole image. 1927 began as a collaboration between an animator, an Esme, myself, and a piano player. Very inspired by silent film and cartoons from the beginning, merging the worlds of the live and the animated. We would we'd do poetry gigs and music festivals, and we were really, really hands-on with our experimenting. So one of the first things we did was I had a tiny little screen here, and there was some little dancing animated characters on it, and I just reached my hand in, which is live, and then it becomes a drawn hand, and I think I flicked one of the little characters over and brought it out. And it's things like that we would just do all the time, just constant little playful kind of little tricks, really, and that's kind of how we began. We've always been really, really collaborative. Design has always been utterly enmeshed with the story, the character, acting, music. It is not everybody's cup of tea. A Guardian journalist recently watched Magic Flute and said, well, it gave me a headache. So, and I think if we all aim to give more Guardian journalists more headaches, but for those that do like it, it is rather a dreamlike onstage world where anything can be possible, and scene changes are very easy compared to lugging about massive sets. For me, though, it's been a wonderful lesson in a very deep and a very true collaboration, more than anything else. And when I do decide that I've been doing this for far too long, I need to go and do something else, it's that collaboration that is so rich, so playful, and so true that I will miss. It's not the shows, it's not the theatre, it's not the Guardian journalists, but it's that very deep, very true, very playful collaboration between people.